Hello, this is Joseph Arthur Roselle, just bringing you a story written by ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT to write a story in the style of H.P. Lovecraft, and the result was quite nice. So, this is The Sanctum of Edriss.
In the heart of Arkham, beneath the layers of winding cobbled streets and forgotten buildings, lay a mystery long whispered among those brave enough to pry into matters of the arcane. They called it the Sanctum of Edriss. Its existence was murmured among scholars as an idle myth, the sort of legend concocted to amuse those who had grown weary of their studies. And yet, none who ventured to find it returned whole, or returned at all. As a skeptical man, Dr. Philip Carver, professor of antiquities, had scoffed at the notion of this hidden shrine. But something, a faint, morbid pull, drew him toward the tattered map he discovered in a dusty, forgotten tome. The ink, ancient and rust-colored, seemed to writhe upon the page, whispering faintly of the cryptic doors it would lead him to. One moonless night, Carver found himself standing before the gateway indicated by that sinister map, an arch of old stone buried in an alley's depths, cloaked in shadows and moss. Carver's lantern trembled in his hand as he studied the carvings etched into the stones. They were symbols like none he had ever seen, and their patterns seemed to warp and shift under the dim yellow light. With a soft creak, the door opened, yawning before him like the mouth of some ancient, unfathomable beast. The air inside was thick and humid, cloying with the scent of mold and rot. Reluctantly, he stepped through, lantern held high, his eyes straining to penetrate the darkness that seemed to lap hungrily at his small flame. As he descended, the walls closed in around him, growing tighter with each step. Runes flickered to life under his touch, thrumming with a faint, malignant energy. The echoes of his footsteps grew softer, as if the very air had grown viscous, absorbing every sound. And then, suddenly, the narrow passage opened into a vast chamber, lit by a faint, sickly green glow emanating from pools of thick, bubbling liquid strewn across the floor. In the center of the room, surrounded by peculiar statues with expressions twisted in horror and ecstasy, stood a pedestal. Upon it lay a peculiar stone, black as midnight and shaped like a shard of something once whole. Shadows clung to it, swirling in unnatural patterns as though possessed of their own malevolent will. Carver's heart pounded. Something deep within him warned him to turn back, but curiosity, that seductive, ruinous mistress, drove him forward. As his fingers brushed the stone, a shudder rippled through the chamber. The air grew colder, the walls pulsating with life as a faint chanting began, rising in an incomprehensible tongue. His vision blurred, and in that moment, he felt an intelligence beyond his understanding. It was vast and ancient, a mind that stretched across eons, seeing all and knowing all, yet twisted by a hunger that defied any mortal sense. With a strength born of sheer terror, Carver tried to pull his hand away, but it would not obey. His fingers were bound to the stone, as if some unseen force had wrapped them in iron chains. His body felt as though it were being pulled forward, his very soul wrenched from within, spiraling into that alien consciousness. His eyes rolled back, and he glimpsed vistas of unimaginable horror. Cities crumbling beneath the weight of stars, skies aflame with colors he could scarcely comprehend, and at the heart of it all, a being, Edriss, squirming and laughing in a language that was not made for the living. When Carver awoke, he was back in the alley, his lantern extinguished, and the faint traces of dawn breaking overhead. His hand was numb, and when he dared to look, he found the same eldritch runes etched into his skin, shifting and twisting as if still alive. In the days that followed, his memories of that night began to fade, dissolving like mist, but the knowledge did not. For within his mind lay fragments of the truth, dark, forbidden truths, that clawed at his sanity, their whispers growing louder each night, their purpose sinister and inscrutable. And as the last remnants of himself unraveled, Dr. Carver understood, in the depths of his horror, that the Sanctum of Edriss had marked him.
Well, that concludes our little short story, and It did take me a couple attempts to get ChatGPT to read that aloud, but I was really happy with the way that turned out. Despite the issues I had with the ChatGPT reading, the writing is I'm really, really happy with it. Despite it not using any of Lovecraft's common words like eldritch or cyclopean, I think it really does feel like a Lovecraft story. And I like to listen to Lovecraft audio, so I really like the idea that I can put out some more Lovecraft material or Lovecraft adjacent material with the help of ChatGPT. So I'm going to be continuing this series. We already have a second story written. I believe it will be called The Ark. And I gave the prompt that it should create a story set in the future in the style of Lovecraft. And so I'm interested to see what kind of perhaps sci-fi concepts will come from that, combined with the style of Lovecraft, like this story. Let's talk about this story a little bit since we just made it through it. Philip Carver does sound like the name of a Lovecraft character. If anybody's familiar with stories, you might know another character named Carter. That's just kind of what it made me think of there. And having a skeptical character, that's also very common in Lovecraft. You have somebody who doesn't believe in these crazy concepts and then has to confront them. Arkham, it's just set in Arkham. That makes it's just as Lovecraft as you can get starting there. I was really happy with it, and I had to listen to it a few times in a row because I was trying to get ChatGPT to read it, and it kept having an issue. Actually, even on this last recording, it did have an issue around right at the beginning, and so I paused the recording and then let it read aloud until it got to that point again, and then I continued the recording, and so hopefully there isn't like a really noticeable cut there, because it's a little bit noticeable. It wasn't too bad considering it did read out the whole story. Overall, the story isn't very long. The reading itself is only 4 minutes and 16 seconds. I was thinking it might be a little bit longer than that. Originally, I was planning on reading these stories, but I was just kind of fumbling over my words, and I really wanted them to be as perfect as possible. So if somebody wanted to listen to them like I do as a way to go to sleep or just a way as having them playing in the background, it's nice to have a decent, well-read version of the story, and that's why I wanted ChatGPT to read it, because the robot voice is a nice, clear narrator. Now, I have yet to hear the recording, so I don't know how well it actually recorded, because I'm playing on one phone, ChatGPT, and then with my other phone recording the sound from that. And so hopefully it was a decent recording, and I really liked the story. It sounded like it created its own Lovecraftian entity called Edriss, some kind of an infinite being that's connected to this shard of black stone that our main character finds. It's interesting, and I love it's short and sweet. That's why I was pretty sure this was going to be a good idea, because Lovecraft is really good at short stories, and the way that Lovecraft doesn't need to have things resolved, they can be open-ended, is perfect for ChatGPT, because ChatGPT, if you've ever tried to write stories with it, has a hard time with conclusions. And so a thing that doesn't have a hard conclusion, that's just kind of open-ended, is perfect for ChatGPT. And so I think these will work out really great. I started reading the next story coming up here, and it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. We've got some sci-fi and Lovecraft concepts in there, and spoilers, the word cyclopean comes up in the next story, so it really does understand Lovecraft's way of using words, and I like that. It's just it just got me so excited for what this series is gonna bring, because it's all I just like seeing the imagination of a machine, you know, like it's algorithms and all that, but it's like magic, really. There's a formula for creating a scenario and a story, and that formula can be replicated. And I know people are scared about the ideas of art being taken by machines, but if there's anything that can be mass produced and it not be a bad thing, it's art. Because even just a piece of art can inspire you, and the fact that it comes from a machine doesn't really bother me that much, because the machines are taking inspiration from human artifacts. They are carrying the flame of human ingenuity in a way, because that's all they got to work with. All they got to work with is human writings in vast amounts, and these algorithms, and it's just like patterns. There are only so many combinations of words. And just because a machine can write a book doesn't mean it takes away a person's ability to write a book in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it just gives us one more perspective to bounce things off of. Because now it's like this vast, like, truly collective unconsciousness of art is like what AI is. It can look at the vast catalog of all the Lovecraft stories and say, hey, how do we make one of these kind of stories set in this kind of a universe? Well, it's all everything. What is a book to us is a user manual to an AI. They're just like a person does. They're looking and taking inspiration and looking at patterns and asking, what is the important thing that makes this stand out? What makes Lovecraftian literature Lovecraftian? What did H.P. Lovecraft feel? And the thing is, the machine itself can't feel, but it's using artistic representations of feeling and perspective. And so even though it's not necessarily coming from a legitimate place, because Lovecraft's stockpile of information has so much emotional background to it, that is translated through ChatGPT. Even though ChatGPT doesn't necessarily feel fear, the idea of fear or being overtaken by an incomprehensible vast being, that is translated through the art of story. And so even though a machine might not be able to feel the different components of a story, it can still use the formula that was put forth by the author and display an emotional context. And it's cool, you know, because it's like it's sci-fi written by sci-fi. You know? So yeah, I think that was a good little intro on what this series is going to be. I'm just going to continue on with it, and I hope you enjoyed the Sanctum of Edriss. Feel free to just listen to the story part and ignore all my commentary stuff at the beginning and end. I may even release a version of each story that just doesn't have me in it at all, just so people don't have to listen to it if they don't want to. But yeah, thank you for listening, and have a great day. I hope this experiment continues and goes well. Talk to you later.